thank you all for having me. Of course, when we talk about what comes next, we're talking about largely things that have not happened yet. And so it's like we're going to have a crystal ball. The easy and short and real answer is to say, I don't know. But of course, that would be a short presentation. And so we'll try to see what we can gather from the information that we have up until now. So we can go on to look at what happened, of course, just really a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when Abelardo de la Espriella won not only the first round of the election, but the runoff. I do like Colombia's election system because at the beginning you have kind of 7 or 8 or however many different candidates, and then whoever the top 2 are go to the runoff. And so you do need, you don't have a situation like we have in the States where somebody might be able to run away with the whole thing with 30% of the vote. So in Colombia, basically, if we look at the end of May 31st, it was a surprise. People expected him to be in the top 3, but nobody really expected, I won't say nobody, but generally the preponderance of opinion was not that he would come in number 1, as he did even ahead of Iván Cepeda. But anyway, he did, and so we went to the runoff. Now, the runoff was actually tighter than people expected because he came in that closely, and then people expected Paloma Valencia of the Centro Democrático Party, that her votes would go behind him, which they did, but then the Iván Cepeda in the Pacto Histórico camp was able to mobilize a lot of voters and get them out, maybe who didn't participate in the first round, and that led to a very close final round, less than 1%. And now one of the challenges that De la Espriella is going to have is that in the Senate, because he doesn't have a political party, he's a complete outsider. He's never been dog catcher, a buscaperro, as it's in Colombia. He doesn't have any real political record, so people can say he's going to do this or he's going to do that. But more importantly, when it comes to governance, is he has nobody in the Congress. Okay, nobody in the Senate and nobody in the House, because he doesn't have a party and he doesn't have that party machinery. Now, what'll happen is they'll do horse trading, and the ID will bring parties who are maybe ideologically aligned with him to ally with him. So you're talking about actually in Colombia, both the liberal and conservative parties, Cambio Radical, especially with him being a costeño, with him being from up on the Atlantic coast where Cambio Radical is strongest. We can expect that. As well as even some of the other parties that are out there. You really don't know. We've seen kind of a split between, you have Sergio Fajardo and his movement, and then Claudia Lopez and her movement, who are kind of center-left, but they will, not that they're huge factors, but they're going to really do some horse trading. Now, Iván Cepeda, who's going into the opposition, along with Gustavo Petro and their Pacto Histórico, they have about 30 or 31 seats in Congress going into this Congress. So that opposition, not only do they have a big bloc, but it is unified, and they will, of course, do whatever they can to oppose the policies that they disagree with, which will be most of them, of Abelardo coming in there. So the thing to watch, in my opinion, going forward is how things go in Congress. Now, Abelardo has brought in Rodrigo Lara as his Minister of the Interior. And in Colombia, unlike a lot of other countries, the Minister of the Interior is largely like the legislative liaison. So his job is to move things in Congress and to go. And this is a guy who was a senator. His father was a politician. His father got killed by narcos. Lara is interesting because Lara had a career and had some time in politics. Then he got out of politics, and he's made a reputation for himself as a cybersecurity expert. So he's been completely outside of politics and going and doing cybersecurity for corporate stuff, and is like, I'm through with all this political stuff. And they go and they call him back in. But he does know how Congress works, kind of the same way that Armando Benedetti came in for Petro as a political operative, as somebody who knew how to navigate Congress. There's more to it. That's a much deeper story. But the idea with Lara is that he will help push Abelardo's legislative agenda through Congress. Let's go to the next slide, and we'll see that, like I mentioned, and this is really interesting, the two traditional parties in Colombia, the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party, that go way back to the dispute between Simón Bolívar and Santander. And of course, there's been all these different histories of the Thousand-Day Wars and the political violence in Colombia. But these two parties, they're still around, but that duopoly has been broken. So you don't have the liberal and the conservative parties in Colombia, even though they're still around, they really are not the factors that they once were. Yes, they have seats in Congress, but they haven't had a presidency since before Álvaro Uribe. Okay, since before, going back to the 1990s. And what'll happen is interesting because my prediction is that they will both fall into the Abelardo camp, the De la Espriella camp. I don't know that for sure, but my hunch is that they will. And that all that horse trading is going on right now. So what we see is that with these elections that just happened, not only did Petro's government get rejected, of course, by a slim margin, because as they're loudly complaining right now that they still have, 49% or 50 or whatever it is of a very slim margin, right? The interesting thing too, though, is that Uribe's movement got rejected in the first movement. And I think what people are saying is that you have a lot of people who are saying we are like maybe on the right, but we don't like you kind of thing. It's kind of a rejection of the institutionalism. I think they're not really close analogs, but you can make some comparisons with what's happened in the U.S. Recently. But anyway, Uribe and his Uribismo movement, I think that this is showing not only is he getting older and older, but he's been convicted. The judges sprung him out of jail, and there's an investigation into how that happened. But he has largely his legacy has been stained, and a lot of people are just really kind of fed up with him, and they feel that he's holding that side of the aisle, if you will, back. Up where I live, which is like 5 minutes from his house, where a lot of the people know him personally. And, when he got convicted, the first thing you saw was big billboards up there saying, he's innocent, he's innocent. All these defenders of him came out. And a lot of these people know him personally. I mean, it's literally his neighborhood. But one thing that I found really telling is this election cycle in that same neighborhood, a lot of the people who would go for Uribe were like El Tigre. So they were really up there. The same people. Is interesting because these people were abandoning him. And also the young conservatives, I think, don't really have any kind of emotional allegiance to Uribe. Okay, and so they might say, look, I'm not for this Iván Cepeda guy, or I'm not for these socialist policies, but I don't like this old man. So let's go with this guy, and he's a young guy. He's not even 50 yet, and so that might have something to do with it. Now, we look at what's happening right now, the transition period, the empalme. The results came out, and for the first couple of days, there were no complaints. But once it became clear that the Pacto Histórico lost, then Petro began to question the results, and he's come out there and he said everything like, and it's one thing, I mean, obviously Trump likes Abelardo, everybody knows that, and that's very public. But Petro has gone beyond that, and he's tried to, it goes back to like 2016. He tries to blame the voting machines, and he's trying to say that the voting machines are corrupt, and he's trying to run all of these different scenarios and stories. Interestingly, Cepeda himself is being a lot more. He's not going down that track. It's like they're taking two different channels of complaint. So Petro's like, it's all a conspiracy and the voting machines are rigged and everything is rigged and this, that, the other. Cepeda has come out and said, well, this guy has a U.S. citizenship, and so he should not be eligible to be president of Colombia. Well, the Colombian Constitution is very clear. It says you have to be a natural-born Colombian, and like I think 30 years of age or something. And I think there's one other qualification I forget, but it doesn't say anything about dual citizenship. And if it did, Petro is an Italian citizen. Okay. Now, interesting, Abelardo is an Italian citizen, a U.S. citizen, and of course a Colombian citizen. But I don't see Cepeda complaining about Petro when he got elected. But Petro, he's also going. He went over to Italy like last week, and he got mad because he comes. I mean, so he's welcome to go to Italy, but he gets to Italy and he gets off the plane, and the Italian government did not send any delegation to meet him. And so he just, I mean, that's fine if you're offended by that, but he cried about it. And that wasn't really a good look. But anyway, what do we expect if we look at foreign policy? So one of the things that that has happened in the current administration, and all politicians, I think, do this. I don't care if you're left or right. I don't care if you're in the U.S. or wherever you are. But you'll have some people that are appointed to be ambassador or whatever, and you're a professional diplomat. You've come up through the Foreign Service, and then you're like, what is it? Herschel Walker is the ambassador to the Bahamas because he's like ran for Senate in Alabama or something like that and lost. Georgia. Okay, so like you can get. There's two different ways you can get into that. Now, I think that in real politics, you're going to have a mix of both in most modern administrations anywhere in the world. You could argue that the outgoing administration has gone too far, and I'm going to appoint you because you're loyal to me, not because you're a professional diplomat. If we look at what's happening, if we look at the chancellor or the foreign minister that's been appointed, and some of the people that, and some of the signals, let's say, that the incoming administration is saying, it looks like their statements, at least, are that we're going to reprofessionalize the Foreign Service and we're going to appoint career diplomats, not people because you were helping me in my campaign or you're my pal or something to that effect. Obviously, Abelardo is a much more friendly towards Israel compared to Petro, who has broken off diplomatic relations with Israel. And so he has already come out and said that he will restore those relations. Right now, there are, I mean, not enemy level, but there are poor relations with Peru and Ecuador. I'll give you some links, actually, to some articles that we've covered. There has been a border flare-up dispute in the Amazon region between Peru. There's an island over there, and Petro has just come out of the blue and said it's ours, it's Colombians, and everybody's. It's like it's not been an issue for like 100 years. But Petro's like, this is ours. And people are like, what the hell? Ecuador, we've had a recent dispute with between Petro and the president of Ecuador. For a while there, we had 100% tariffs at the border. All the border businesses were complaining. And what tends to happen, if we look back over the last 4 years, we'll see that if somebody gets elected and Petro is disappointed with who gets elected, like in, let's say, Peru or Ecuador, okay, because the leftist guy did not get elected, and so Petro is upset. He tends to like let's say the foreign policy is personalized. Now, you can like it or not. I'm not saying that it's the right policy or the wrong policy, but the foreign policy tends to follow his personal, let's say, view of the incoming politician. So Peru, they've been very politically unstable. You've had it's like worse than the UK. They've got a different president, like what's this guy, Mr. Benface is the new candidate over there in the UK that's running, this guy that's got a trash can on his head. Did you see that? Oh yeah, he's a real candidate against the prime minister or whatever in the UK. But anyway, we can expect whatever the reasons or the origins of the conflicts. Right now, we can expect improved bilateral relations with Peru and Ecuador. So now, I'm sure there are some people who won't be happy with this, but if we look at who's going to, who wins right now, the mining and petroleum industries are already celebrating. I see this. Especially the petroleum industry, they're popping corks because there has been no new drilling permitted. And actually, one of the interesting things is that even before, even during the Duque administration, they were not as friendly towards petroleum. There were a lot of complaints in the petroleum sector at the time because they were not creating adequate permits for new drilling based on what the projected need was going to be for Colombia. So basically, we said, okay, we have X amount of reserves right now with current production, and if we don't increase production in Colombia, then we're going to run out of, especially natural gas, oil as well, but especially natural gas. So what's happened is that those industries, because Abelardo has said that he was going to restart drilling and production in those packs, both offshore and onshore, and the same thing with mining, those industries are already celebrating. I mean, literally, in the past couple weeks, just what I've seen as a journalist with the industry sectors, ACP, which is the petroleum gremio, or what I've seen with in the mining sector. So we have the mining MinExpo coming up in September. Yeah, in September, for example. And those, you already see those companies that have traditionally participated but have kind of slacked off, announcing that they're going to be coming back. If we look at so in Colombia you have the gremios, which are of course the trade associations, and you might have like the gremio for the truckers and the gremio for the taxis or whatever. And then you have the big, like in the US we have the Chamber of Commerce, okay? So, and they're not, in the US they're like trade associations, like the US Chamber of Commerce. So here you have FENALCO, and you have ANDI, and these are like big, just basically business interest groups, and they have very much welcomed. They actually came out and endorsed Abelardo, and they are very, I guess you could say, celebratory with his win. I have seen in the last 4 years projects put on hold. A European company was going to build a big factory in Cundinamarca, a glass factory. And they had already announced it. They had already said, okay, yeah, we're going to build this big factory. And then in 2023, they just quietly put it on hold. They're like, we don't have the confidence going forward. And we've seen a lot of slackening, if you will, and not just in extractive industries like mining and petroleum, but things, if we look at contact centers that come to Colombia, if we look at the tech industry, especially here in Medellin, we look at Ruta N and the types of businesses that they've been able to attract to the city. That pace has certainly slowed over the last 3 years. I would expect that to pick up. Now, we have bigger macroeconomic factors. So let's suppose we go into a deep recession in the U.S., it doesn't matter. You're going to have just less investment money to go around and less opportunities to expand. So if something like that happens, that's beyond Colombia's control. There's going to be nothing that they can do. But I do think that you'll see a change in investor confidence. One of the interesting things is we see a lot of people coming in from the Caribbean coast. Abelardo is... I think he's from Cordoba, no? But he seems to have been based recently in Barranquilla. The transport minister is a former mayor of Barranquilla. The education minister is coming in from Cartagena. But we see a lot of costeños coming in this administration, which is interesting. The vice president is a paisa. Of course, he has been the rector of... I did an interview with him way before he was in politics. It's really cool. I interviewed him in 2016 when this was before the Duque administration, when he was the rector of Rosario, of one of the universities in Bogota. And the interesting thing, and I had just started Finance Colombia the year before, but he was very insistent on talking about social inclusion, which I found interesting because that's like a super elite university. But that's what he wanted to talk about at the time. He comes from not a poor family, but from not a rich family, like a family that had hard times and things. Then, of course, had a couple of positions. He was the commerce minister under Duque, and then also then he became the finance minister when they ran Carrasquillo out because of the price of egg scandals. Like, how much is the price of eggs? He was like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was kind of hilarious in a like a cringe kind of way. If we go to the next one. So, I mentioned, Jose Manuel Restrepo, and like I mentioned, even though I think that the Duque presidency, in my opinion, now I'll give you my opinion, was largely a failure. But I do think that that Restrepo actually did a good job in his two minister posts that he held there. So it's like, okay, the overall presidency didn't do a good job, but he in his particular remit, in my opinion, I'll just give you my opinion here, I think he did a good job there. So then the finance minister, Miguel Gomez, he's also, I don't know as much about him. He's also very respected. He's led Banco Dex, which is like the Exim Bank for Colombia. Fasacoda, Asoco Flores, which is the flour industry trade group. Fasacoda is the insurance gremio industry trade group as well. And he's bought in with remit to restore fiscal balance. Lara, I already talked about him. He's the new interior minister, and like I said, he's been completely out of politics recently, but is called back in to really, his main job as the interior minister is going to be to push through Abelardo's, to get things done in Congress. And that's going to be especially challenging because, like I mentioned, Abelardo doesn't have anybody in Congress. He has something like 4 seats. Jorge Mora has just been appointed. He's a retired general. This is the second time a retired general has been appointed to the Secretary of Defense or Defense Minister, because like the U.S., they tend to put civilians into this job. But he was retired, forcibly retired last year, and Petro had a big purge where he's like, okay, I'm going to retire these generals and colonels and promote the people I want to promote. Since then, he's been a critic of the Paz Total policy, and he is being called back by Abelardo to run the defense. He's calling, of course, as you would expect, for a stronger military and police presence. And I don't want to paraphrase him, but he's basically stated that his goal is to restore the presence of the government and security forces in the remote areas of the country where right now they don't happen to be. And speaking of that, if we look at this map, you can see that, and this will, to be fair, we're going to go back to the Duque administration. And these areas right here are those areas that are where there is a strong, let's say, presence of either the Paracos, either like the AUC or the guerrilla groups, okay? And if we look at the blue, that's where like one group or another has control of the areas. The red is where 2 or 3 of those different groups are fighting. So you'll see like the ELN fighting against the Estado Mayor, or fighting against the FARC dissidents. Or you'll see the FARC dissidents fighting against the AUC. And those are these areas. And then you'll see the green areas where they're both present, but they're not necessarily fighting. Maybe they've come to some kind of understanding, or there's just enough to go around for whatever it is that they're doing. But the main point that you can take away from this, and this graph is based on data I got from Fundación Ideas de Paz. Basically, it's growing. So we can see here that under the Duque administration, it grew. He obviously, I believe, my opinion is that he really failed when it came to both implementing the 2016 Accord and then also security in general. But then when Petro takes over, we can see that not only has it gotten worse, but that the groups are actually not even like, they're like, hey, there's enough to go around. And so the main point is that the areas out where these armed groups are in control have certainly grown in the last 4 years. I remember, 5 years ago driving to the Atlantic coast up to Coveñas, and it was perfectly safe. I certainly would not make that trip today. I would fly. Probably 9-10 times out of 10, nothing would happen. But the worsening security situation is real and palpable on the ground. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Now, other people that he's appointed, I mentioned Elsa Noguera. She's an ex-mayor of Barranquilla, ex-governor of Atlántico, another costeña. Like I said, he's bringing in lots of people, not only people from the coast, but he's bringing in lots of people from the coast. Again, Mauricio Gomez Amin, Commerce Minister, Congressman from the Caribbean coast. Vivian Morales, she's from, I think, Cartagena. Now, she is the most, I guess you could say, MAGA member of, or at least obviously so, of Abelardo's appointment. She has been appointed as the education minister, and she is like, well, we got a lot of Southerners in this room. She's like an evangelical, you know, like Jesus gonna get you type, okay? And she's, she had a statement. She said we should take Marx out of the schools and put God back in. And her background, she has been in politics, but she's I think she's even more famous. I don't know if she's like a preacher, but she's a big evangelical voice in Colombia, especially in northern Colombia. And so the most opposition that I've heard to the cabinet appointments, the most complaints have been around her. Now, what is she going to do? Is she going to get in there and be like Marjorie Taylor Greene or somebody like that? That's what the fear is. Okay, and maybe she will. Maybe she'll get in there and say crazy stuff or do crazy stuff. But it'll be harder to do crazy stuff because you have Congress against her, and then you also have FECODEN, the teachers union that's very strong, and they are going to, of course, oppose anything that they don't like. So even if she does have crazy ideas, I think they might be moderated by reality. If she tries to push through crazy ideas, I doubt she will last in the cabinet because she might become a distraction. Again, all of these are predictions, so you know, but that's somebody to certainly watch. Former mayor of Bucaramanga, so they're moving things, so they're bringing in people from the Santander region, of course. Now, this guy, Fabio Arjona, I don't know a lot about him personally, but he has a really strong record. For those of you who are concerned that, okay, they're going to, like, you know, pour oil everywhere, I don't think that, he's already said that they're not going to do that. Now, he's not the boss, but he's already said that they're not going to do that, and he probably wouldn't have taken the job. He's the director and vice president of Conservation International. He's a marine biologist. He's a real career environmentalist, you know, so I think that appointment is very reassuring. And even, I mean, I like the environment. I don't want to, you know, destroy everything and kill the whales. But, you know, but he's not. Now, if you're like a Greenpeace and PETA radical and you're going to he's not going to be pouring paint on the Mona Lisa or anything like that, you know. But if you're thinking about like a mainstream, real environmentalist, you know, but not going to be out on some kind of, you know, let's say mission beyond the mainstream, I think that we've got he's a marine biologist. Now, we have a lot of open questions because, for example, human rights, we have a blank page. We really don't know. One of the things with being a political outsider is what to expect. On one hand, there's a lot of suspicion because Abelardo's been a defense attorney for like all of these big mafia guys. On the other hand, I have an employee, for example, who likes him, and she's a feminist, and she points to how he defended I don't remember the name. Remember there was the feminist either, like in Bogota or some lady, they like killed her, and it was I forget the case, but he actually so it was a weird thing because you had the government prosecution, but he went to the family, and you can kind of be like a private prosecutor. So like, I don't think the government's doing enough, so I'm going to hire an attorney to be a prosecutor. It's more powerful than that, but it's kind of that idea. And not only did he get a lengthy life sentence for this guy who like tortured and killed this woman, but he did it pro bono. But then he also led to some changes in the law to make feminicide, like you can kill somebody, but then killing a woman in certain circuit, like domestic violence, goes beyond that, and is actually it's like murder and aggravated murder, so it's like another level of crime above that. I'm not a super legal expert, but it's something like that. One of the things that I see, he's very thin-skinned. He has a bad habit of slap suits. which I forget what they stand for. It's something like, it's like basically a frivolous lawsuit against journalists. So if I write something, one of the things I like is that my focus is not on, let's say, organized crime, because I don't have any bars on my window. And if the bad guys want to do, if I write it, Bank Colombia did something stupid, they're not going to come and get me. Okay. But, I have a lot of respect for organizations like Insight Crime, for example, that specializes in writing about organized crime. And they're really brave for some of the things that they do. But one of the things that Abelardo has a bad history of is if you write something that he doesn't like, not like any little thing, but if you really piss him off, he'll because he's a lawyer, he'll sue you to annoy you, or he'll sue you to try to. Bingo. He's trying to cost you, exactly. He's trying to cost you a lot of money. He's trying to get you to self-censor, okay? Because the idea, if I report on this, even though I'm right, do I want to go through that hassle, okay? And that happens in the U.S. and happens all over the world. But he has he's already kind of gotten a reputation for doing that. Let's see. Now, you might, if you like technocrats, then you will take confidence with a lot of his cabinet appointees, but still that leaves him. He's a blank slate. We don't know anything about what he's going to be like. And we can all look around from experience and history, how somebody runs a campaign sometimes is how they're going to govern, but not always. Okay, because you're going to run a campaign based on what you need to do to get elected. Okay, and then how you govern might be consistent or congruent with that, but it might not. And he's really a big unknown. We just don't know. Is he going to run a tight ship? Is he really going to be a corruption fighter? Or is he going to be the most corrupt guy? We don't have any background on him to really say. We can look at the vice president. We can look at, different ministers and congressmen and see what their records are. But still, this is a new experience, and we don't really know what we're getting with him. Another thing, of course, he got elected with an extremely tight margin. And Cepeda's already saying, look, we had 13 million people and almost the same as you. And that's true. And so that means that you have not a half of the country, but a half of the people who voted in the runoff who did not vote for him. And so he can either be a conciliator and say, look, I know that you didn't vote for me, but I want to have a fair government. Or he can just be like, screw you, and I'm going to, cater to my base, and we'll see. The point is, we don't know. We don't know what he's going to do. His speech that he gave on election night was different than the way he campaigned. It was a much more conciliatory. He ran an aggressive campaign, but then he gave a conciliatory speech. So which one is the real Abelardo? We'll have to see. Another thing about Abelardo that's probably a negative is he has been a successful lawyer, but he hasn't been that great of a businessman. He's got records out. He's got a clothing line out. He's come out with this rum that's lost all this money. He had a restaurant in Miami that flopped. He's not so he's not, now he hasn't bankrupted a casino, but, but outside of his, he seems to be a good lawyer, but he doesn't seem to be good with all these business ventures that he's had. But I guess if you have that much money, it's like a play money. Like, I'm going to go and launch these vanity lines. And he does seem to be kind of a narcissist. He likes to take pictures of himself and his suits and all this stuff like that. But who in politics these days isn't a megalomaniac? It's like a prerequisite, right?